That little moment between Tiger Woods and John Daly says a lot. Tiger represents one side of golf: discipline, routine, training, and structure. Daly has always represented something very different. And yet, for all the ways he seemed to go against the usual model, he still won major championships and became one of the most unforgettable players the sport has ever had. So in this video, we're looking at how other golfers have talked about John Daly, because once you hear the way people describe him, you understand pretty quickly why he left such a mark. One of the biggest reasons John Daly fascinated people was that he could show up looking casual, almost unbothered, and still produce shots that most players would struggle to pull off even on their best day. Phil Mickelson tells a story that gets right to the heart of that.
It's just like the 1992 BC Open, when you came out and you won and you never went to the range or hit warm-up balls. Did you even hit one or two by the putting green?
I didn't even know there was a range.
There you go.
No, you said you had to drive somewhere, and I go, oh, drive somewhere for a range?
Yeah.
I ain't going nowhere.
And then there's David Feherty's story, which captures the early version of Daly perfectly. Feherty talks about meeting this skinny young John Daly in 1987. Daly is leading the tournament. He ends up winning, and then after all that, he invites Feherty out to a party.
I actually met him on the first tee, a place called Rand Park, and I was leading the tournament by a shot, and he was a shot behind me, and I went out in 29 that morning, and I was still a shot in front of him. I wondered who this skinny American kid was and why he wouldn't go away. And I hadn't seen him. He was either on the other fairway or 100 yards, in front of me. He ended up winning the tournament from me by a shot. And he said to me at the prize giving, he says, "Do you want to come back to my hotel? I'm going to have a party."
A lot of people hear John Daly's name and immediately think of driving distance. And obviously, that was a huge part of his image. He was one of the longest hitters the game had ever seen, especially for his era. But that description by itself doesn't really do him justice. Because Daly was not just a big hitter, he had creativity around the greens. And that's a big part of why he was actually able to win at the highest level, rather than just becoming a fan favorite with a wild swing. Bryson DeChambeau points that out really quickly during their Break 50 video, when he mentions Daly's short game.
Like, they talk about your long drives all day long, but you had an unbelievable short game. Super amazing hands.
Shot you.
And when you listen to the greats talk about Daly, the thing that comes through again and again is just how naturally gifted they believed he was. Jack Nicklaus once said, "John Daly doesn't care what his golf clubs are. That kid picks up anything and hits it great. He is a tremendous talent." And that's such a revealing quote, because Nicklaus is basically saying Daly had the kind of talent that didn't need perfect conditions. He didn't need everything to be precise and carefully set up for him to perform. And when that kind of praise is coming from Jack Nicklaus, it tells you this was never just about Daly being entertaining. The ability itself was real, and the people at the very top of the sport saw it clearly. And that brings us to the part of the story people sometimes forget when Daly gets talked about. He is usually seen more as a character than a player. People forget that he was a two-time major champion. In 1991, he won the PGA Championship at Crooked Stick in one of the most surprising major victories of that era. Then, in 1995, he won the Open at St. Andrews in a playoff. So he won two majors, which already puts him in a rare category. But at the same time, you can't help but wonder what that number could have been if he had approached the game differently. Because Daly wasn't exactly known for discipline. He's been open about the drinking, the smoking, even how much he disliked the gym, and at one point, it even led to a suspension. And that's really the John Daly conversation. Not whether he was good enough, that part was never in doubt, but how far that talent could have gone. When Gary Player was asked about natural talent, he didn't name Tiger Woods, he named John Daly. This is what he said: "You want to know who was the most naturally talented player I ever saw? John Daly." If Daly worked like Tiger Woods works, he would have gone down as the greatest player who ever lived. He had a phenomenal future, and in my opinion, he ruined it. The drinking, the smoking, the late nights, they lose their edge. And one of the reasons the Tiger Woods and John Daly contrast has always been so interesting is because they almost feel like opposites in terms of how they approach the profession. Daly once talked about asking Tiger to go get a beer instead of following his usual gym and practice routine. Tiger didn't go, obviously, but he gave Daly a line that he has remembered for years. He said, "If I had your talent, I'd be doing the same thing you're doing." Of course, with Daly, the golf was never the whole story. The lifestyle became part of the public image too, and over time, it became almost impossible to separate the two. Fuzzy Zoeller once told Daly, "I got 150 grand, you're never going to make it to 50. Daly later joked about collecting that money once he actually turned 50. It's a funny story, but it also says a lot about how people viewed him. The concern was not just that Daly lived differently from other players. It was that people genuinely wondered how long that lifestyle could keep going before it caught up with him. And that tension followed him for years. People admired the freedom and the personality, but there was always this underlying sense that it came with a cost. Eventually, that cost became harder to ignore. As Daly got older, the conversation around him shifted. It was no longer just about talent or personality. It was also about pain, health, and what the sport would allow for a player whose body had clearly been through a lot. In 2019, Nick Faldo questioned the decision to let Daly use a cart at the PGA Championship because he had trouble walking. Faldo said, "I think walking is an integral part of being a pro golfer. I'll leave it at that." That's a restrained comment, but the point is pretty clear. Golf is demanding on anyone over time, but in his case, people also looked at the lifestyle and wondered how much of the wear and tear came from the game, and how much came from all his choices outside of the game. So what is the real John Daly story? Well, it's the story of a player with obvious, unusual athletic talent, the type of talent that great players saw immediately, and they never really stopped talking about it. But with Daly, the story never stayed inside the ropes. The lifestyle, the choices, the unpredictability, it all became part of the same narrative. And that's why he still stands out. Everything about him was real. The ability, the success, and yes, even the chaos. And in the end, that's what defines him. He was a major champion, with a level of talent that still makes people ask the same question years later. How far could he have gone?